Thank you for volunteering to be a judge for the Thompson School District Science Fair. An effective judge knows that this is an important experience in the life of every participant. Please make sure all participants remember the science fair is a positive experience in their life. Some notes on being an effective judge. For many students, you may be the first person who has ever interviewed them. They may not know how to start talking to you, so what we would like is for you to approach a student in a friendly and professional manner. Introduce yourself and then ask them to explain their project to you. This gives them an opening to start talking to you. Ask questions, but do not provide answers for the students. Some of the students have a tendency to repeat your suggestions to other judges. Then they skew the results because they might tell a judge something that you said instead of something that they discovered on their own. Make sure you are fair to all the participants. Spend about the same amount of time with each student and project. Carefully listen to the students' explanations of the project and find out how the project was done in an approachable and non-intimidating manner. This is what a middle and high school scoring sheet looks like. The top part of the judging sheet has a place for the student's name, project, and grade. This information should be on your judging sheet when you get them. There are times you may need to add this information yourself, such as when we have you judge extra kids. The top right corner says middle school. We use this in our district for middle school and high school. Typically, we have enough students in middle school to have a competition in placing. The high school students that participate at the district level usually are just participating as a practice before going on to the regional competition. They're not competing at the district. We don't usually have enough kids for high school to have a competition. So this is just a way for us to inform high school kids about their project's strengths and weaknesses, just to help them prepare. The next part is a section for comments. And this section is really, really important for you to fill out. This is how you provide feedback to the students about their project and their presentation. Please keep the comments positive, but if there's something they could have done better, feel free to explain what you would have liked to see and why. For every improvement, please provide something they did well. This sheet is cut on the cut here line, so the students will only see the part above that line. This is the part where you will score the student projects. This section provides the information that we want the projects to be evaluated on. Please be consistent on your scoring between projects. You will use these scores to rank your placing for the students. After you have finished judging, you will come back with your team and discuss placements based on each judge's ranking. These points are to help you evaluate the projects on the criteria important for the student to become successful scientists. Because each judge will award points differently, it is important that you work as a team to discuss ranking based on each judge's rank, not on raw points. Remember, this part of the score sheet will be thrown away after final ranking, and no student will see these scores. So you can use this piece of paper to write any notes or comments to yourself that you would like to remember. Points are awarded based on how well you feel the student meets the requirements listed on the score sheet. So if there's no evidence of meeting the requirement, you'll give them a 0. If there's some evidence that they meet the requirement, give them a 1. A 2 would be maybe if they met the requirement, but you feel like they could have done a little more. And then 3 would be if the requirement is met and done very well. So like the exceptional student. For middle school, we have 4 areas that we focus on for judging: scientific thought, thoroughness, creative ability, and clarity. Under the focus of scientific thought, has the problem been clearly stated? The student should have a specific question or problem that they are trying to answer. For example, does light, color, temperature affect reproduction of bread mold on white bread? The question is very specific. It asks if light, specifically the color temperature of light, affects the reproduction of a certain kind of mold, bread mold, specifically on white bread as opposed to other breads. Being specific is important because types of light may affect reproduction molds differently on different types of bread. This experiment is only answering the question in relation to bread mold on white bread. Most middle school students won't be quite this specific, but this is the goal that we would like them to achieve. High school students should absolutely be this specific. Procedure was appropriate, easy to understand, and should have yielded consistent results. The students should have created an experiment that will give them an answer to their question. The steps they take in the procedure should be easy for you to understand, both the sequence and why they did the steps they did. Also, the procedure should be done in such a way that the results over multiple trials would be consistent. For example, if they repeat the bread mold experiment 3 times, the results should be consistent based on the procedure they designed. The variables, independent, dependent, and controlled, are clearly recognized and defined. There are 3 different types of variables students need to understand in order to design a proper science experiment. The students should list these on their board, but if they don't, it's okay as long as they're able to tell you what they are. Let's go into them in more detail. An independent variable is the one variable that you change. You should only have one changed variable in your experiment. In our bread experiment, only the light color temperature should change. A dependent variable is the one that responds to the changes that you made to the independent variable. This is the variable that you observe or measure. This would probably be the amount of bread mold on our bread, but it could also be the type of bread mold that grows. The number of dependent variables could vary. There may be more than one that's measured. Controlled or constant variables are all the variables that could cause your results to change. You want these controlled so they don't affect the results of your experiment. Some variables that should be controlled are the type of bread. They should all be the same brand, bought at the same store, at the same time, with the same expiration date. The brand of light bulb, the distance the light bulb is from the bread, the temperature in the room, the moisture content in the room. Each trial of the experiment should be conducted at the same time in order to control some of these variables. Most experiments will have many controlled or constant variables. Results are accurate, consistent, and any errors have been adequately explained. If the procedure was done properly, the results should be accurate and consistent. If they are not, can the student explain why? In science, it's very important that results are accurate and don't vary wildly. If there are errors, students should understand why they have the errors and what they could have done differently to control those errors. Research was evident and relevant to the project. The students should have done research on their project before starting. Ideally, we want them to research whether the project has been done before, and if they found a similar project, they should be able to explain what they are doing different, why they're doing it different, or why they're repeating an experiment where they've already seen an answer. Going back to our bread mold problem, the students should research different types of bread mold. They should understand how bread gets mold. They should also have an understanding of the color temperature scale of light. The focus of thoroughness. The project was designed to answer the question. Sometimes we see that students create an experiment that doesn't answer the question or problem that they are trying to solve. But in middle and high school, those students should be able to design a project that will give them an answer to their question. The conclusions are based on an adequate number of trials, typically at least 3. Students should be running at least 3 trials of their project so that they can see whether the results are consistent with each trial. Ideally, we'd like to see more. 5 really at this age level. Depending on the type of project and the number needed to get accurate results, the trials may run into the hundreds. The project journal is complete and thorough. It should include specific dates, measurements, and observations. Students are supposed to have a project journal that records everything they have done throughout the experiment. It should contain all the information necessary for them to design their board. Because our students come from so many different schools and different classroom teachers, students may not have that journal. If they don't have a journal, you can make a note in their comments that if they continue on to the regional competition, they must bring their journal with them. Do not let this be the difference between the ranking of students unless it's so close that this is absolutely the only tiebreaker possible. Creative ability. The project is creative and original, unique, and attempted at an appropriate grade level. By middle school, we want students to design experiments that answer a question that they have. We want the students to have a genuine interest in the project they choose, and we want the project to be at a grade level that they can understand. You're going to have to judge for yourself if you think the student is capable of the project they're doing. At this age, some of the kids are super smart and creative, so your judgment will partially have to be based on their understanding of their project. Also, we want this to be the student's project, not their parents' project. It's okay for parents to help, especially if there's something dangerous involved, but otherwise the student should be doing the project. If the parent is helping because they need an extra hand, that's acceptable. Students should tell you exactly what they did and when they got help. Also, if there's something a student could have bought but instead they made, even with the extensive help of a parent, this should reflect positively on the student since they learned more from the project by making the solution than by buying it. An example is one time we had a student who was doing a cheese experiment, and for the experiment, they needed a cheese block to shape the cheese. And instead of buying one, the student's parent helped the student make the block. The student learned more from the making of the block than they would have from buying the block. So we want them to be rewarded, even though they had the parents' help. We don't want them to be penalized for that. Rate the display's visual appeal and organization. The display should be at a middle school or high school level. It should be clean, it should be neat, and it should have proper spelling and grammar. Clarity. How clearly does the finalist discuss their project and explain the purpose, procedure, and conclusions? The student should be able to tell you what they did, why they did it, and what the outcome was. They should understand the meaning of every word they use. So if they're talking about light color temperature, they should be able to explain to you exactly what that is. Are they able to make you understand how they reach their conclusions? Watch out for memorized speeches that reflect little understanding of principles related to the project. How well does the project display explain the project from start to finish? The display board should explain the major elements of the project. If the student isn't there, a spectator should be able to figure out what the experiment is about and what conclusions were reached. At this level, students should also be organizing their board in an orderly fashion. Typically, it should read like a book with the project being explained in the order it happened. A person looking only at the board and display but unable to talk to the student should be able to completely understand the project, the procedure, the data, and the conclusion. Someone reading the board should also be able to recreate the experiment from the information given. And the last one we have under clarity is, does the student speak clearly, make eye contact, and show enthusiasm for the project? All right, let's talk about one more thing, conclusions. This isn't something that we're grading them on, and here's the reason why. Null hypotheses are just as important to science as positive results. This isn't something that is often talked about, but many people tend to feel that a project should come back with positive results, meaning the experimenter should have discovered something. This is not a view we want to perpetuate. Finding no effect, or what is typically called a null hypothesis, tends to feel like a disappointment. However, if we view it from a pure scientific perspective, if an experiment is conducted properly, we can see that every test result is important. Let's take an example. If one experimenter discovers that lemon water is bad for you, that experiment will be all over the news. Publishers and news media will be spreading so-called news about this important new scientific discovery. Now, let's say there are 30 experiments conducted that show no evidence that lemon water is bad for you. Will that be published? Probably not, because it isn't a sensational story. We want our science fair to be scientific, so a student who comes back with a null hypothesis or a negative result should be treated equally on that regard as a student with positive or shocking results. Okay, so some important things for you to remember as you're judging. The questions address elements that are important for a successful science project, and these are the elements we want you to focus on when you're judging the student. Please use the questions and your scores to help you rank the students for second, third for awards as an individual. And then when you go back with the members of your judging team, you will discuss your rankings with them to come to an agreement on the overall ranking for the group of kids that you are giving placements to. Make sure you fill out the comments section on the top of the page so students can receive feedback on their project. Thank you so much for offering your time to judge these kids. You really are making a difference in their life, even though you may not see it. I've been doing science fair for, oh gosh, like 10 years now we've been doing this, and the kids, it's really amazing to see the kids grow and come out of their shell and become many little scientists. They really, really start thinking about how to think like a scientist, and you are a very important part of that. So thank you very much.